Welcome to the lazyfluency podcast, where we have casual conversations switching between English and Japanese so that you can learn from and with us along the way. I'm Joey.
And I'm Yami.
And the topic of the day is Japan is reopening! But before we get into that, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and drop a review on whatever platform you're listening on. We appreciate the support. But with that out of the way, Japan is reopening! Sorry for people who have their volume turned up really loud, but I'm very excited about this. Yay!
本当にね、やっとでございますよ。
I don't feel enough energy from you, Amy, right now. We've been waiting too long for this. Let's get a congratulatory.
やっとでございますよ。3年間。もう、
Yeah.
ね。
Crazy. Oh, want to read the article just off the top? The official statement.
はい。じゃあ、ちょっと、ニュースアリコーがあって、で、じゃあ行きます。アメリカ・ニューヨークを訪問中の岸田総理は記者会見を行い、来月11日から入国者数の上限を撤廃するなど、新型コロナの、水際対策をさらに緩和すると表明しました。ね、10月11日からね。で、岸田総理は、10月11日からは水際対策については入国者数についての上限撤廃、個人旅行解禁、そして、ビザなし渡航の解禁を行います。
As a quick summary for our English listeners who, struggle to get all that, basically Japan is taking off all their travel restrictions. You don't need a visa for entry starting October 11th, as well as doing I don't think it was mentioned in that article, but they're also doing a promotion for Japanese travelers who want to, like domestic travel. It doesn't apply to foreign travel, but yeah, that wasn't in that article. I don't believe.
全国旅行割と、イベント割っていうのがあって、でもこれ多分、外国人は入らないとは思うんだけど、ね、多分日本人だけじゃないこれ。
This celebration is about the fact that foreigners can finally travel to Japan. So for the time being, we will move on because we have things to celebrate. Normally we talk about comments in the last section of the podcast, but somebody commented the exact topic of this episode, and so we're deciding to actually set the tone of the episode with their comment. Let me open it up real quick. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Cool. So this comment is from a Matt, which is hilarious, but yes, this comment is also from Matt.
One of the Matts we have.
One of many. No sooner do you opine on Japan pulling a fresh sakoku, they open back up. Finally, I'm so excited for this change. I began studying Japanese in preparation for a business trip scheduled for late February of 2019, before anyone in America was taking things seriously. I was surprised to find my trip was canceled for concern over COVID-19. It was the very first thing affected by the pandemic for me, but also for everyone else I knew too. It turned out to have a real bellwether of the disappointment to come. But I continued auditing Japanese at local college remotely despite the hiatus. Even though Japan is reopening now, the window for the business trip has long since expired, and so I'm planning a family trip instead. My question for you is, as a tourist, what sort of activities should I engage in to best use my limited vacation time to practice my Japanese speaking and listening skills? As an added difficulty, I'll have my wife and 2 young children in tow, none of whom speaks any Japanese. 何か上限があればよろしくお願いします。ありがとうございます。Matto. P.S. The only reason that survey says Americans want to travel to Japan more than anywhere else is because it's a total fantasy, no cost considered. Just like when they want to learn Japanese, right up until they consider that they have to learn a couple new alphabets before they can even really get started. Even Americans want to visit the land, or every American wants to visit the land Dragon Ball Z and sushi in theory. Then they look at the flight costs or flight durations, or consider that they don't speak Japanese. And then they realize that they can't even type Japanese characters off a menu for a quick translation and decide to instead just travel to the nearest big city for a Broadway show and dinner at the Ritz. Amy, do you want to summarize any of that? Because in Japanese?
まあ、なんていうんだろう。ちょっと長いけど。まあなんかもともとそのビジネストリップがあったんだけど、マトさん。でも、COVID でちょっとキャンセルになっちゃって。で、まあでも、その、リモートで日本語を勉強してんのかな
Yeah, well, remotely, yeah.
そう。で、マットさんは、家族旅行でちょっと日本 きたいんだけど、で、その日本の旅行で、日本語もその練習できて、しかもちゃんと日本語楽しめて、時間を有効的に使いたいみたいなね、感じかな。
Yeah.
うん。で、どうすればいいか。
Yeah, so we actually planned this episode to be that episode talking about as a tourist, now that Japan has finally opened up, what should you do? Where should you go if you've never been to Japan? And a lot of advice. But before we give our advice on that, I actually wanted to go over some of obviously we're very happy and by we, I mean me and collective foreigners who've been wanting to travel to Japan. But I was curious to see what the reaction was from the Japanese side. So I took some comments from one of the press releases from a YouTube video just because I thought they were pretty interesting. Obviously, this isn't a full survey of all the people, but you can get a general vibe of the different maybe stances that some people take. I have about, I don't know, 10. We don't have to read all of them. Amy, if you want to choose your favorite ones to read.
じゃあちょっと何個かね。じゃあ岸田さんの多分インタビューの、YouTube のコメント欄で書いてあったのが、まあ、鈴木エクスプロージョンっていう人が、円安でアメリカ人が多く来るなら緩和した方がいいのかね。で、はい、じゃあもう一つ。うんちが余計なことしかしない。まあ、だからこのうんちさんは、あんまちょっと、なんていうの、賛成じゃないみたいな感じだね。で、
Yeah,
前さんが、頑張れ岸田。
So we have criticism so far about Japan not dropping, I'm assuming, the COVID restrictions is what the person's talking about. And then we have somebody who's 6 people like this too from Unchi saying that Japan doesn't or Kishida always acts selfishly, I guess is the way you translate that. In terms of trying to open up Japan for the economy, I guess is the assumption. And then one positive comment, Gambare Kishida. Very vague. I thought there was one. Oh, there's actually a lot of sentiments about the mask. Can you read the one from Mofu Mofu?
モフモフ。日本には来いって言ってるのにマスクはしろっていう矛盾。そうね、海外ではもうマスクの時代は終わったのにね。そうね、多分ね、多分うんちさんみたいに、あんまり賛成じゃないのは、多分外国人がマスクをしないとかなんかで、感染を広げるんじゃないかっていう、考えを持ってるんだよ、そういう人。だからちょっと賛成じゃないとかっていうのもあると思う。
Oh, I think this person actually is in agreement. 日本に来いって言ってるのに、マスクはしろっていう矛盾。As in,
そうそう。
they're saying, yeah. They're saying, why do we have to wear masks if you tell people to come? Or maybe this person's angry about all the mask mandates, which is actually interesting because I don't really hear that opinion that much. Notably, I don't know, like this is typical of the internet, but all the negative comments tend to have the most likes. Like the one under this one, I don't even know how to read the person's name, but the 国内の正常化が先だろう, which is basically saying we should make sure everything's happening like good in Japan before opening up Japan. And so that's 13 likes, which is like not that much, but this is like a response only in Japanese to like a press release. So I couldn't find one that was massive on YouTube initially. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong place. So yeah, I'm actually curious. There's probably going to be, whether or not Japan stays open, that's a whole other question. They might open up and then get a lot of pushback. For the time being, I'm really happy. Obviously, we literally last week did an episode on this, and the only reason we're doing an episode right now is because we've been talking about this enough. If we didn't do an episode about Japan actually officially reopening, it would have been super weird. It just kind of left everybody in a weird, unfinished business type feeling.
ね。じゃあ、とりあえずあれだね、日本で何すればいいかの、なんだ、
Yeah,
アドバイス的な。
Obviously, things could change. Japan could close back after a month or something, or people get angry, whatever. But right now, this is all positive vibes with all the positivity we can have. Holy cow, this has been forever. I know a lot of people want to do initially, obviously now people who want to study abroad could, but a lot of people were affected by this lockdown a bunch of different ways. And so, like, people don't know this, but although we're doing the same podcast, we've never met each other in person because of like the lockdown. The podcast started into the lockdown, so big deal. With that out of the way, yeah, let's start with recommendations. Amy, do you want to start with any? So these are general recommendations as a first-time traveler to Japan. Where should you do? How should you think about visiting Japan? And yeah, general stuff like that.
なんだろうね。俺責任重大だね。なんていうの。でもなんか少なくとも、まあ、どれぐらい日本にいられるかによるけど、例えば1週間とかしか入れないんだったら、なんて言うんだろう。まあ、メジャーなところは行った方がいいとは思う。例えば東京だったり大阪だったり、京都だったり、まあ北海道でもいいし。でも、なんて言うんだろう。できるだけ移動時間に時間をかけない方がいいと思うね。1週間だけとかだったら。ね。移動で結構時間取られちゃうから、関東だったら関東に絞るとか。
Yeah, Matt didn't specify exactly how late February of 20. Oh no, that was his initial trip. I'm not sure how long his current trip is, but I would agree as well. Like if you have a small amount of time, I personally think it is better to choose a location or a location in the surrounding regions. And mainly that's because although there is something called the Rail Pass, which is I think something that you were recommending, Amy, right? The JR Rail Pass?
ああ、そうね。なんか JR とか乗り放題のチケットがあるんだけど、お得で。でもなんかそれ多分3日間とか7日間の使い放題で、いくらだっけなんか2万とか、なんとか。だから、
It's $223, I believe, for 7 days, what I was looking at.
そう。だからもしね、例えば1ヶ月とか入れる人だったらそういうのを使って、北海道から、なんていうのまあ、九州とか行っちゃえば、かなりお得だとは思うね。そうそう。絶対お金かかるから、そんな遠くまで行っちゃったら。だからそういうのを活用したり。
I personally, so this is where I don't think we disagree, but my perspective on this is if you only have a week and you're getting like, 1 week, $200 plus to be able to use all the rail lines, the benefit is obviously you don't have to worry about figuring out each train system or whatever, and you can always use the fast available option with the, what is the word? The high speed trains in Japan, and that is nice. Yeah, but at the same time, realistically speaking, you can get a plane flight for like, I think I got one from Tokyo to Hokkaido for $90 when I was in Japan. And assuming, let's say you take 2 plane flights in a week, that's already that's still under 200. And realistically speaking, if you're traveling to a different place, you're only there for 1 week and you're traveling to a place every single day, you're going to be super burnt out. You're probably not going to get that much sleep. And realistically speaking, I don't think there's a great reason to do it. Every city is so dense, like incredibly dense, especially if you're coming from America. It's not even comparable to, which is funny because even in my, like this, I live in pretty like rural America. I still find places I've never been to in rural America with barely anybody living here in the first place. And so in Japan, that is super, super true when there are millions and millions of people and all buildings go up 7 stories tall. I mean, obviously in Tokyo and bigger cities. And so my first suggestion would definitely be focus on a region or a specific area. You will not think, wow, I did not do enough. There's just so much to do, especially if you're planning ahead of time.
あともう一つは、なんて言うんだろう。もし、なんて言うんだろう。見たいものがあれば、とか、興味持ってるものあれば、それを調べて、なんていうの、ピンポイントで行くっていうのもいいと思う。例えばさ、すごいラーメンが好きな人だったら、ラーメン博物館とか多分あると思うから、そのラーメンがね、いろんなとこのラーメンが集まってるとことか、あと、例えば日本の歴史とかが好きだったら、日本の歴史を展示してる博物館だったり、ね。なんか結構日本って、 なんて言うんだろう。なんて言うんだろうね。その、個々のものが、その、特化されてる場所が結構あるとは思うから、調べていくっていうのもね、いいと思う。行き当たりばったりじゃなくて、前々から調べて、ここ行きたいっていうのね。で、それでプランする
Yeah.
感じ。
I have two opinions on that. So the first is I totally agree with you in the fact that Japan is extremely good at providing entertainment or I don't know,
うん。
history, whatever, for small niches. And that's one of my favorite
う
things about
ん。
Japan is since everything's
そう。
so close, and there's so many people, businesses can attract a very, very large audience. This is not somewhere I'm necessarily recommending, but for example, as how specific it gets, I recently recently, I think 3 months ago, I saw a post online about there's a cafe. It's called a cafe. It's not really a cafe where you can get inside. You can be eaten by a orca. You go inside this fake orca stomach for 3 hours, and then it
オーカーっ
poops
て
you out
何？
at the end. It's what is it? It's like the whale with like the black whale with white eyes. I don't know if it's a whale. I'm trying to
シ
remember
ャ
what
チ
the
かな？
Japanese for it is. Yeah,
シャチか
exactly.
な？
Yeah, shachi.
うん。
Yeah,
うん。
yeah,
あ、そん
and
なのあるんだ。
yeah, it's crazy. It's that crazy. So it gets extremely, extremely specific. So if you know that you're really into something, I would definitely look. Do they have a thing dedicated in this Japan? Because there's probably a shop for whatever niche you could possibly have,
本
and
当
you
に、
will
本当
definitely
に。
find people who love whatever you are into.
う
But
ん。
my second
う
thought
ん。
on it is totally also recommended. Depends on how much time you have, obviously. But if you have a day that you like a chill day where it's not planned as tightly, I totally recommend just walking around. Obviously, it'd be helpful to have Wi-Fi or 4G if you do it. But if you do, like people are nice. You're not going, I don't think, statistically going to encounter like any danger from doing so. Just choosing a direction and walking around. Obviously, in Matt's case, I think he said going with a family, which might be easier to keep things planned if you have children.
うん。
But
う
if you
ん。
don't, I totally recommend just picking a location. Preferably, this would be better in a city, just so because things are more accessible.
う
Choosing a
ん。
direction, walking down it, and seeing what you find.
う
Um,
ん。そうね。多分、いろんなとこね、歩いていく中で、なんか興味あるものとか見つかると思うし。
yeah,
ねえ。あと、なんだろう。その、多分、マトさんの中でさ、なんか、日本語も同時になんか練習したいみたいな感じだったじゃん。
yeah.
これさ、ちょっと思うのがさ、日本人はとてもシャイでございますので、あんまりお店行っても喋らないんですね。ちょっと、うん。なんか、イメージだとアメリカだとさ、例えばバーとか行ったらさ、なんかもう知らない人なのにもどんどんなんか、はいみたいな話しかける感じだと思うけど、日本だと、知らない人に話さないんですね。うん。
Yeah, that's the vibe that you get from. There is a lot of truth to it, I feel like, in America, where movies will start a lot of times with a protagonist who are walking to a bar, seeing some old old dude with a lot of experience or whatever with a beard, and then I'll look at him and be like, hey, come here often or something, and it'll be the start of some budding friendship between this random dude and this other random dude. That's You can do that with Japan, but by going to a bar, just because there are a lot of people drinking. But realistically speaking, for the most part, you're only going to meet probably people who are 50 or older and they're men. And also they're like completely drunk to the point that they won't probably even remember you. I've
う
heard,
ん。
or you might get swindled. There's a lot of there. It is a thing where if you're in Tokyo, if you can get swindled out of your money by getting charged exorbitant prices for sake or whatever that you didn't intend to buy.
うん。
And yeah, I do want to just say I don't recommend for even for people who do drink that just going to a random bar. It's not like America. Like you're picking up chicks isn't a thing at bars. You're just gonna. I mean, talking to old dudes is fine, but it's people who came back from work, just like sort of in America as well. It's not as much of a gathering place like to hang out where all like young people or even old people go when they're just like hanging out in the way that you'd think so in the U.S. I would recommend almost anything else. Go to look up online and see if there are events for something that you're interested in.
そうね、なんか
Go
ミー
to
ト
a
アップ
public
とか。
place.
う
Yeah.
ん、あ
Or
と、まあ、
something like that.
日本語を練習したいんだったら、店員さんに話すのもいいかもね。例えばさ、ご飯屋行った時にさ、注文するじゃん。例えば。その時に、
Yeah.
おすすめなんですかとかさ、そういう感じで練習は多分できると思う。
It depends. If you're going by yourself, I think that actually is a great way to do it. But if you're coming as a family, you can actually, well, I've personally had experiences of scaring off workers when you come with a full group of foreigners, like even like 4 or 5 people. I remember once at a cafe and I did it. And I mean, I've done it. I mean, obviously, I had some foreign friends that I did some stuff with, as well as some Japanese
でも
friends.
さ、違うよ。あれじゃん、マットさんはさ、家族で行ってマットさんはまあ喋れるじゃん。そしたらさ、
Yeah. No. It doesn't matter how much Japanese you can speak. My point is, if you all look Japanese, you're going to get the Japanese lock. There's a very high chance you might get especially since nobody's really talked to foreigners in a while in Japan,
あ、
even
まあね。
before the
だから、
pandemic.
なんていうの、あっちから多分ちょっと
Oh,
イン
I
チミ
mean,
レーリンだから喋んないと思うけど、自分から聞けば多分
yeah,
答
no,
えて
you
わける
can.
と思う。
But I'm just saying that in terms of having an actual conversation, I think like, as we talked about in a previous episode, customer service isn't really chatty. They
まあ
they
ね。
follow a very strict set of question answer
そうね。
responses.
そ
And
う
if you
ね。
go outside of that, you get the one derailed response to すみません and then some rule policy or something.
う
But
ん。
I recommend instead, if you want to use Japanese, to do what I said a second ago. So if you have a hobby or whatever, I look up to see if there's some place where that's done, some place where that's
うん。
like there's a shop or history, anything like that, that seems like it's a place where people actually go and congregate and strike up a conversation with somebody, or go to straight up just like a park and and strike up a conversation with somebody who's there. Most people actually have a pretty positive reaction to talking to foreigners because they haven't done
そう
so.
ね。
In work
まあ、ま
settings, it's
ず、
slightly different because they have so much pressure to
う
perform.
ん。
But
日本語喋った瞬間に、あ、日本語上手ですねっていうのは絶対言われると思うよ。ただ、
yeah,
こんにち
well,
はって言
there's
っただ
two.
けでも。
Yeah, there are
Forever
two.
上手。
There are two responses. One, you get the panic response and they'll respond to you in English even though you've spoken Japanese. And then yeah, the
う
other one
ん。
is you'll get the 日本語上手ですね.
そうそう。
With
た
that
だ、はい
exact
とか言っただ
that's
け。
exact. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I have my own 日本語上手ですね stories. Plenty of those.
Everywhere you go, so.
Yeah. Let me think. Are there any other general things for language? If you're only going there and you want to specifically practice. I mean, it depends to what degree you want to practice. Obviously, there are meetups like cultural exchanges in
そう
Japan,
ね。
especially in
ラン
big
グエッジ
cities,
の言
where
語。
you
う
can
ん。
go and they're literally there for that purpose. But if you're
う
going to
ん。
those, then a lot of times it's more like one group wants to practice English, the other group wants to practice Japanese.
うん。
And since there are already so many, I think like Japanese people who would totally be willing to strike up a conversation just passively. I don't know. I mean, it's probably worth checking one of those out. I personally never been to one when I was in Japan.
うん。
My go-to strategy is probably not applicable because I did it at a college where in the man, when you remember the Japanese word, but not the English word, the cafeteria. There we go. When I was in the
食堂
cafeteria,
うん。
I would look for a group of 2 more people as to not come off as intimidating, and then sit like probably two seats away from somebody, and then kind of see if I could make a comment about something in their conversation and then segue myself into sitting beside them and having a conversation. And I actually had 100% success rate. I never had a negative interaction. I talked to people in their 40s. I talked to graduating high school students, college students, people like working construction, or like people in the 50s, 60s,
う
people interested in
ん。
learning
すごい
Spanish
な。
and French.
すごいな、
So,
それはすごいな。うん。
but that was also at a college setting. So there was, I don't know. But I mean, I feel like you'd have a picnic or something. You'd have a very good
まあ
response doing
ね、
that.
勇気出せば。
Oh, the last thing I feel like we should cover is locations. So, you probably have your own opinions on this, but what places should you go to for specific types of experiences? For example, the obvious one, Tokyo. If you're looking for a big city, you come from somebody very rural. Because I know some people say, oh, don't go to Tokyo. The heart of Japan is in rural Japan. Yeah, probably. I mean, some version of the heart of Japan is rural Japan. But as a person who lives in rural America, holy cow. Like, obviously, rural Japan's its own thing, but like, don't feel ashamed for wanting to go to the big city. Because Tokyo is awesome. That's my first thing. Do not get shamed out of not going to where you want to go. Because every prefecture I've been to in Japan is awesome. And I do not understand any like hatred towards specific reasons because they're too popular or whatever. Like that's the appeal of Tokyo. You have so many people in one location. That's literally why you're like people. There's so many people there. So many people don't live in Tokyo because it sucks to be in Tokyo. It's obviously there's a whole work culture in Tokyo. Separate issue. You're on travel. You're on vacationing, so you get all the bonuses with none of the pain. But do you have any thoughts, Amy? Like what place do you think is good for what type of person?
ショッピングしたいんだったら絶対東京だね。すべてが揃います。はい。ショッピングは。ショッピングとか、なんて言うんだろう。その、趣味関係ので、なんて言うのその、例えばさっきも言ったように、その、歴史が好きだったら歴史の博物館とか。そういうのは東京が、まあ、多いね。間違いなく。で、その、田舎行くんだったら、田舎ね。
I think sports activities, like as in outdoor activities, are really good in rural Japan.
例えば川下りとか、あと、
Yeah.
なんていうの、フルーツ、果物狩りとか、今の季節だとなんだろう。
Well, I'm talking also like hiking as well.
ハイキングとかね。
Especially depends on like what season you're going. Japan has a lot. I believe we discussed this before, but Japan, if you're going in the winter, has this highest snowfall in the world in Aomori. So there is a bit of everything. If you're looking for hot climate temperatures, you want that vibe that maybe you don't get often. Okinawa is a good option. If you do want a rural, like it's hard to rural every region. One of the biggest pluses I will say about the more rural places in Japan is they all tend to have their own local festivals and other activities that have been going on for sometimes hundreds of years. And those are I've been to one, and they're so much fun. And in Kyoto they had this big event, which like where they yeah, and you might be able to participate in them. I remember in Kyoto you were able to just volunteer to do so. I think I was busy or something, but I didn't. But also I'd recommend if you're into sports, you can totally, like both sporting events I went to, which is sumo and wrestling, I was able to make friends with a random dude, and he like gave me the history. One dude said this is the first time he's come to a wrestling event in 20 years. He gave me a bunch of advice. We sat together, we traveled together, and it was awesome. And then one time with soccer, I was brought over a guy. I was looking for seats, and some people weighed me down like, oh, come over here. And they gave me this giant flag for it. This actually was for Saitama. I was cheering against Saitama from the perspective of Kobe. So I'm sorry but yeah, no, it was a really good experience. So this has been a long section, but
待って、ラストに絶対に現金は持ってください。これ重要。
Oh yeah, cash. You need cash. Yeah, you need cash. Like really bad.
そう。もし東京だったらまあクレジットは使えるんだけど、まあタクシーは使えないし、あと田舎だったら絶対にキャッシュだから、本当に。
Yeah, that is insanely important.
ここ一番大事、マジで。前の部分聞き逃してもいいけど、ここキャッシュ絶対大事。Hi, we are back.
戻りました。いつも同じこと言ってるんだけど、それは逆みたいなことになってるんだから。大丈夫。
But so usually in the middle section we talk about our life updates, but this time we want to talk about pandemic stuff, right?
これも人生のアップデートなんだけど、その日本がついに入国再開してるから、そのコロナの振り返りみたいなことをやろうかなと思ってた。
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you, what's your thoughts, like overall, about this pandemic?
まあ、最初に持ってるのが、このニュースを聞いて、友達は何人 このニュースについて聞いたと思うんだから、そのコロナの影響がだんだん減ってる感じがするの、日本で。
What do you mean?
アメリカだと、そのコロナという、もちろんみんながまだ終わってないということ知ってるんだけど、生活に関しては全然終わった感じがするんだけど、日本に関してはどう今の雰囲気。
Well,
マスクつ
like,
けてるみんな、それはそうなんだ
yeah.
けど、それ以外にみんながどういうふうに捉えてるのか、今の、現状。
I guess,
な
yeah,
んかもちろん岸田さんの表明。
yeah. So, like, for, yeah, average people, like, they, how do I say, they care less about COVID because, like, they started traveling in Japan. But as a med student, we are told not to, like, go out really, like, frequently. So I'm just like how do I say 例外 exception. But yeah, so it's been 3 years and we've been having like 7 waves. Is it 7? I don't know. I don't remember. But yeah, many waves. So we just got used to this lifestyle.
で
Yeah,
もこの
wearing
ニュースを
masks.
聞いてみんなどう思う？その言い忘れたことがあった。最初のセクションでは、何人かの人が、これは岸田さんが再開すると言ってるんだけど、実際はすぐに、なんかもう一度、国が鎖国してしまう可能性もある。それはそうなんだけど、それだけやってない。この政府が、何でしたっけ？この日本語忘れたんだけど、日本の政府は、円を買うことにした。なんていうか、経済的なことなんだけど、その US ドルとJapanese yen の、効果を上げるために、その政府がいろんなことをやってる。プラス、もちろん何でしたっけ、イベントの割引とか、食べ物の割引とか、その国内の旅行のシステムも同時にやってる。そのいろんな理由、これだけじゃなくて、再開だけじゃなくて、いろんな方法をとって、経済をもう一度、いい方向にしようとしてる、政府は。そのため、岸田さんはマジで、今回は、再開しようとしてる気がしたんだから、こういうエピソードを作ってる。もちろん悪い方向に行っちゃったらごめんなさい。でも今回は違うと思ってる。でも日本では若者はそう思ってるんだけど、年寄りはどう？このニュースを聞いて、両親とかは何か言ったの？
Well, I haven't talked about this with my parents, but I remember they said if we invite foreigners, then like that's gonna be like how do I say bad for maintaining this corona situation. Like it's gonna be like worse if we invite foreigners. Yeah, they
今
said.
そんなにやばくないでしょ？東京とか。
Well,
1
it's
週
like
間
so,
3000人とかだったの。
yeah, 3,000 or 4,000, I guess. In Tokyo, just in Tokyo. So like, and I don't know, like, once we start inviting foreigners, and then if the situation gets worse, I don't know what to say. But,
多分他の言えばよかったことは、その最初のセクションでは、その田舎の方だと結構今はどうなってるかどうかわかんないんだけど、その前だとそのほとんどの人が本当にほとんど 70% とかはこのコロナのことはなんか心配してるので、その日本が開いてるからといってその田舎の店とかは開いてるとは限らない。
Yeah, right.
でしょ？
Yeah.
その今の時点で日本に行ったら多分それをしておいた方がいいと思う。その田舎の方に行ったら多分 まあ偏見も来るかもしれない。
Mm-hmm.
そういう
Yeah,
外国
just
人の偏見
yeah,
とか、コロナと
yeah.
いうなんていうか、まあ病気とかあるんだから。
Remember to wear masks because
う
like
ん、
Japanese people tend to judge people like without wearing masks だから
うん、そ
ね。Yeah. 郷に行って
う。うん。
は、なんだっけ郷に従えってやつ。なんだっけ Rome.
Oh,
Do you
when
know?
in Rome, do as the
Yeah,
Romans
yeah.
do.
Yeah. Yeah.
うん。
And, うん。
でもまだ日本はそのコロナの感覚はまだその強いってこと。つまり。
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
まあ、じゃあ、
Everywhere you go, you see this hand sanitizer, like in the entrance.
うん。
So, yeah, just follow the rules. Yeah, kind of.
それは、うん、まあ、大事だと思う。実は、このセクション
Yeah.
は、振り返り、私にとって振り返り、日本が開いたからコロナがついに終わったって感じがするんだけど、日本では全然違う気がする。
Yeah, yeah.
こういう、まあ、それを忘れないようにしてください。なんか、自分がマスクをつけないことに慣れてる人はたくさんいると思う。まあ、ほとんどの世界。世界というかわかんないんだけど、多分、
Yeah.
ほとんどの人がマスクつけてないってこと、コロナが昔々のことみたいに感じる人も多いと思うんだけど、今の時点で日本ではそういう状況じゃないので、それを留意した方がいい留意すべき。うん、そう。
Yeah.
うん。でも、
Yeah.
それは言っても、私にとってそのコロナ感覚完全に、まあ完全じゃないんだけど、80% とか今感じないので、でも今でもその影響を感じてる。その人が多分、まあもちろん日本の状況は大変みたいなんだけど、いろんな人を中退してるでしょ。も今、その英語。
Yeah.
それで、これはまあ少ない、なんていうか相当的な統計とかについてわかんないんだけど、その今の時代の人が、まあ他のポッドキャストを聞いてたんだけど、最近の若者はこれはアメリカの結果かどうかわかんないんだけど、24歳、まあ、20歳以下の人は40%は人をなんか1回デートしたことない。で、
Go on a date?
うん、そう。1回しかデートしたことない。その40%の男。で、もちろんそういうデートだけじゃなくて、友達とどこかに出会うとか、
Yeah,
インターネッ
definitely.
ト以
Yeah.
外のコミュニケーションとか、
Yeah.
ほとんどの人は取ってない。まあ、ほとんどというか、まあ、前と比べると、そのコロナ前の時代と比べると、そういう社交的なスキルとか、ほとんどの人はなくしてる気がする。
Yeah. Yeah, like yeah, so I can talk about this, but like so I had this phase that I was so depressed. Yeah, because I couldn't talk to anyone and then I couldn't go to school like for like almost 3 years, right? 2 years, 3 years, and then yeah, I didn't have friends and I couldn't go hanging out with friends. So that actually had a big effect. Yeah, on myself. And definitely this pandemic caused many mental issues to many people. So yeah, I guess yeah, still people have mental issues right now. So that's a
うん。
bad influence, I guess.
他のニュース、割引とか、国内の旅行に関して、友達なんかいたの？反応とかしたの？その唯一のニュースは、
Oh,
再開だけじゃなくて、
yeah.
まあ、外国人に関係ないんだけど、その、再開するための、まあ、再開じゃなくて、その国内の旅行を上げるための、何でしたっけ、法律は違う。そのシステムは実は結構いいみたい。40% の旅行のための、なんていうか、コストをその支払いができる。その政府は、すごく大きな数、まあ、料金。
It's called Go to Travel. Like we did that like 1 year ago. Go to Travel campaign.
で、どうなったの？
And yeah, it worked well, I guess. So yeah, people used that to travel like in Japan. And I remember my friends used that. Yeah.
いや、自分も使えるでしょ。
Yeah. But since I'm kind of busy, so I can't like go traveling. But yeah, definitely this なんとか終わり全国旅行終わり is good 政策、かな。
And we're back with the final section. And if you have reached the final section, thank you for one. But also, you should drop a review on Apple Podcast and or send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com to get a question answered, language related and or otherwise, your experience in Japan, where you want to travel next in Japan. What do you want to do? How do you feel about Japan opening us? Send an email. We will probably respond in the next or one of the following episodes. Thank you so much. This episode is kind of a comment extravaganza, as we normally don't respond to episode or comments in the first part of the podcast, but it was such a perfect comment we had to. We have two people that we want to respond to. One a classic, Shockox, and another one a new commenter, or not commenter, a person who emailed lazyfluency@gmail.com. And because it's long, I will just go right ahead and start. The first one, which is smaller, I will start with his comment from last week from Shockox. I cut it down a little bit to just some of the stuff that's relevant. So let's go. First, I got a preface. I love all the Matts commenting. I probably said it before, but my name is also Matt. Thankfully, Shockox keeps it simple enough. But it sounds like your podcast just specifically appeals to people named Matt, which is a hilarious thing to say.
マットさんぜひね、他のマットさんも。
Yeah, and so I just wanted to, I'm not responding to the whole comment, but now that I'm on this week, comparing the yen to the USD is interesting too, because it seems like ours is depreciating as well. So like if our dollar is getting worth less and Japan's currency is getting even further from ours, so like what is today's yen compared to 2012's USD? I'm sure that number is somewhere, but I'm too lazy to search for it right now. I believe we did look at it. It was around 103 yen to the US dollar, I think in 2012 or something like that. But I'm too lazy to search for it right now. So I'll just say that's interesting and ponder it like a fake intellectual. Also for general tourism, because apparently we did one thing episode about tourism last week. I'm not surprised about France being number one. Even in the US, I think I know more people who've gone to France than Japan. Though I know more people who want to learn Japanese than French. I think France seems easier to people. You don't need to learn French to get around France. And while that's also technically true for Japan, I think people see it and think it's just a little too foreign. And that place sounds just like the perfect level of antisocial for me. We need something like that in the US. Going on an antisocial outing is absolute goals. He's referring to the Anata no Warehouse from our last episode. Thanks for your comment, Shockox, as always. Do you have any general thoughts, Ayumi?
General thoughts.
What about his, as in the depreciating yen or the France versus Japan in terms of places people go?
なんかね、どうなんだろうね。急な振りでびっくりしてんだけど。まあ、general opinion は、まあ、日本、なんかさ、一番、このコロナがさ、なんていうの、いい影響を及ぼすんだとしたら、みんなさ、3年間来れなかったから、その分だけ日本行きたい欲が高まってるんじゃないかなっていうのは思う。
Yeah, but we did check to see that it wasn't just 2020, like I said, if 2019, Japan was also had an extremely strong foreign tourism.
だからそっからまたさらに3年間の我慢があるからもうね爆発する。
There's a sexual term for this called blue balling, but not to get too sexual. But Yeah, I totally feel like, yeah, everybody was like getting very excited about Japan. And then there were the Olympics too, which I was planning to attend. And then, yeah, then nobody was able to. And that tension has just been there for so long. I do find it, he's saying something very interesting. This Matt is saying something very similar to the previous Matt, which is, I guess I probably see as true, which is everybody wants, in theory, to either learn Japanese or go to Japan. But like going through the actions of doing it is just too much of a hassle compared to a lot of the other
まあね、だっ
alternatives.
てフレンチはさ、まあちょっと、だって英語ってフレンチから来てるところもあるじゃん。だからまあ似てるっちゃ似てるじゃん。
I think French is English is Germanic, but yeah, but I mean
だ
they're
けど
both
ちょっ
they're
と
all
ちょっと借りて
yeah,
るじゃん。
yeah, yeah,
うんけど日本語ってまず
Latin, I think.
completely 違うじゃん。
Yeah, definitely. Except for
だから
katakana, which is devouring the Japanese language.
まあねそうそうだからね、まあこれで日本語勉強する人が増えればいいけどね、どうなんだろうねっていう。うん。
Yeah. Oh, also, and yeah, Anata no Warehouse is actually great. As you're saying, I obviously the place in Kawasaki I went to, I don't believe currently exists because of the pandemic, which is a big sad point. But I don't believe I would call it antisocial necessarily. Arcades can be banger in Japan. I might do a whole episode or even a YouTube video about that.
アーケードは
But
ゲームセンターだね。そうそうそ
yeah, they're so cool. That's a whole other topic, but they're awesome. People are lively and they go hard in the arcades. Probably one of the only places in the world probably that still has like active arcade scenes. At least are like they were in the 1980s and 90s. But anyways, next comment. This is a new commenter. Welcome. We appreciate your comments or your comment today. I will read it. Hi, Joey and Ayami. I'm loving the podcast. My Japanese is still pretty remedial. I mean, I feel like that all the time too, so no worries. But I try to work on it at least a little, usually a lot, every day. I know Ayami's a runner, and I think Joey runs too, except for right now with the injury to your foot. I hope it gets better soon. I also love to
う。あ
run.
りがとうございます。
I ran 50K for my 50th birthday in January of this year. My current goal is to run a marathon in Japan in the next few years. Can either of you suggest a good one? I'm leaning towards one in Osaka, but ultimately it doesn't matter. I was an exchange student in Yoichi, Hokkaido, when I was 16 and wouldn't mind revisiting the Sapporo, Otaru, Yoichi areas. I've heard a lot of people suggest learning to talk about your interests while learning a language. Do either of you have any suggestions or resources for talking about running in Japanese? Finally, I was wondering if either of you had any advice for learning to think in your target language. This is something I'm really struggling with. Part of it is just that I don't have enough of the language yet, but I keep hearing I shouldn't learn by translating from English to Japanese or vice versa, but I don't really understand how else to go about it. Anyway, I really appreciate the podcast and hope you all stick with it. Warm regards, Ashley. Thank you so much for the comment, Ashley. I have a lot of thoughts about this, but as I talk way too much, do you have any thoughts first?
thoughts っていうか、
marathon. So basically, marathon runner interested in running a marathon in Japan, and also the advice about thinking in your target language.
まあそのアシュリーさんはなんていうの、マラソンのなんかその大会みたいなの参加したいじゃんだよね。
Yeah.
In Japan で。で、まあどうやって探すかっていうと、なんかね、その Google、まあなんていうネットでそのマラソン大会とかなんか調べると普通になんていうんだろう、申し込みできる大会がずらーって並んでるサイトが結構あるから、それちょっと見てみると今開いてんのが関東プラスアルファマラソン大会ガイドっていうね、バカマラソンっていうまあホームページなんだけど、そこにその今からエントリーできる大会っていうのがリストが結構あって、で見るとまあ1月1日に東京で10キロ3500円で参加できるとか、そうね、ハーフ6500円のやつとか、100キロ18000円、すごいな、屋久島とか結構こういう載ってるサイトがあるから、ここで例えばなんだろう、マラソンフルマラソンやりたかったらフルできるところ探して、で申し込むっていうのもできるかな。Me personally は全然ランナーなんだけど、勝手に趣味でやってる感じだから、マラソンはね走ったことないのね。 中3の時にその学校の行事で50キロはやったことあるんだけど、それ以来やったことなくて、個人的に走ったのは20キロぐらいだったから、勝手に自分一人でね。だからマラソンやったことはないんだけど、まあでもこういうね大会参加するのもいいかなって感じかな。うん。
Yeah, I also have not ran a marathon. I am a runner. I mean, I ran track competitively. Main events were 800, 600, or 600, 800, I guess, and 400. So no, not a super long distance runner, although I would sometimes in the off season run like 12, 13 miles, but it was not my main event. But my professor, one of my Japanese professors, is really into marathons. And so I have learned some of that from him. And the good thing about this site that we'll actually put this both in the show notes, because apparently it's a thing for podcasts as well as on YouTube for you. This is for 2023. I'm not sure when you're wanting to run, but you can probably decide, will be updated by then for that. Because of the fact that it not only has the prefecture, the date, the name, by when you need to apply, the amount of people, which is very helpful if you want to know when you want to run, the distance and how much you have to pay for it, which is all very helpful information. But since we haven't run it, we can't really say about a specific one that's recommended. I'd choose probably whatever scenery you like the best. The thing I like the most about running, when it comes to like more long distance running, is the scenery. I still remember like my time running near Biwako, which is a lake near Kyoto. It's not in Kyoto, I don't think. Technically, I think Biwako.
It's its own place.
Yeah. And it was just so beautiful because there were cicadas and there was like literal monkeys, which like in the forest near it, and there were small like shops lined up along the left side of the running trail, right beside the lake, which basically looks like an ocean because it's so massive. And it was just beautiful. Literally the forest, like Princess Mononoke type style forest on my left, hearing cicada noises while I see people, because I was running in the morning, and so I'd see a bunch of people opening their business and their little shops, and they go "Ohayou gozaimasu," and I'd be running and go "Ohayou gozaimasu," and yeah, it was such a good vibe. So I'd choose somewhere that you think is the prettiest, honestly, unless you're looking for like really hardcore competition for like in your age bracket or something, in which case then you probably have to choose whatever the biggest city is if you want that. As for your question about how to talk to runners, I believe this is kind of like what we talked about in the first section, where their meetup is great. Granted, you'll probably end up with more foreigners. I don't know how popular meetup is. It's an app to find people doing something area. Outside of that, I kind of recommend maybe going onto Twitter and following some people in that space, running space, and you can probably find about different events people are going to or things like that, or get in the general discussion surrounding running. But realistically speak, or maybe for example, there's an app called Hello Talk, where you could, which is meant for language exchange, and you could find somebody who is running their profile and maybe talk to them or something. But generally speaking, I think it sounds like you just want to find somebody you can talk to, something you like about or shares a similar hobby. So yeah, maybe one like a language exchange app would be useful, especially if you're not living in Japan. And do you have any thoughts, Amy, about being able to think in your target language?
何それは
So
趣
for
味に関して
you, no, this is for learning languages. So instead of thinking in Japanese and translating to English, thinking in English and speaking English. She's saying she has difficulty trying to figure out how to do that.
How to do that? なんかね、やっぱりこれもなんかどっかのさ、エピソードで言ったかもしれないけど、なんか勉強してるっていう感じは出さない方がいいと思う。なんか毎日自然にやる感じがいいよ、やっぱり。なんかね、なんていう頑張ってる感を自分で感じてるってことはちょっと無理してるから、歯磨く感じでやればいいと思う。毎日歯磨くでしょ。だからそうストレスない感じでやればまあね、自然とついてくるし、まあポッドキャスト聞くのいいと思うよ。走るのが好きだったら、私も走ってる時ね、ポッドキャスト聞いてるから、ね、まあlazyfluency聞きながらでもいいし、日本語のね他のやつ聞きながらでもいいし、やっぱインプットはね大事だから、アウトプットも大事だけど、 だからね、そこ、走りながら聞くっていうのもおすすめします。はい。
Yeah, I think if I'm not sure what your level is, but what I would say is that if you getting input is extremely important, but also one thing is if you don't have many opportunities to speak Japanese, then you're obviously gonna have trouble. It's gonna be a lot more difficult, and I don't mean having to talk to other people. I mean, so there's a lot of ways you can either sing to song lyrics, you can shadow people reading like books, like audiobooks or something that have the text associated with it up, which will give you basically you want to get yourself repeating the sounds and phrases, like a lot of set phrases, because if something that I still even struggle with this day, but I mean, it's like an eternal struggle, which is understanding that people in a different language, especially the more different it is from your native language, it's not like they're just speaking English and then like the very thoughts they're conveying aren't just, oh, this is just this English, this English sentence probably exists in Japanese. Sometimes that's the case, like something like what we said earlier with the when in Rome, do as the Romans do. There's like a similar expression. But a lot of times the fundamental way people structure sentences and think about themselves in relation to other objects in time is just different. One of the things in Japanese that is extremely different that I struggle to as being an American is you do not phrase things from the perspective of you having agency over an object. Things are done to you and things are done to other people in Japanese. So you'll see people using the passive tense a lot. For example, when people ask for your jobs, it'd be like, どんな仕事されてる or されていますか? And that's, from my head, that it's very confusing because される, technically the sentence is, if you put in all the additional information that's being excluded, is what job is being done by you? You would not think of the phrasing.
そうなの?
Yeah, well, される doesn't mean, yeah, する is the, what's it called?
されるは多分あれじゃない？受動体じゃなくてさ、あれは敬語なんじゃない
の? No, the way people present it, される becomes 敬語, but I'm saying the grammatical, what that means, される, something being done to you. It literally, that's the passive tense of to be done something, like 何かにされた, される. It's not like a special, it's literally just the same verb. But maybe this is too linguistics.
細かいこと考えない方がいいよ。なんかされるは受動体だなんだらじゃなくて、なんかもう
Yeah. Well, with set phrases, I don't think you have to overthink it. But when you're part of thinking in Japanese is accepting the fact that you don't know what the most natural way to say something is. So getting input and repeating what other people say, just like verbatim, just set phrases, is super helpful. I feel like.
セットで覚える、シチュエーションで覚えるのが。
Yeah. Obviously, learning grammar is very helpful when it comes to being a shortcut to learning something, as opposed to having to memorize a set every time. Just an efficiency thing, especially in terms of just communication. But one of the first things that if you're just having trouble even thinking in Japanese is just don't even try to start from English. Just don't try. Just be like, just doing the second you start starting to translate for something else, just ignore that and use what you currently have, the set phrases you currently have, and eventually with enough input you'll start to get that Japanese thinking mind. Because when I'm speaking Japanese, although I'm very self-critical of my own Japanese, as I feel like many learners are as well, I'm not switching from English. Like when I stumble or if I'm having difficulty, it's for its own unique set of reasons. I might actually know what word I want to do, but it's not coming up. But I'm never consciously actually, at least nowadays, starting from a place in English and then trying to create the sentence.
それね。
Because that just creates, yeah. Go ahead.
私も日本語から絶対やんないんだよ。なんでかっていうと、二つのが違うから、日本語のと英語のがあるから、こうやって日本語と英語でなんかこっちからこっちにしようとすると、この切り替えがあるからさ、頭コンフューズするんだよ、逆に。
Yeah.
だから、まあ、最初はやっぱり、あんま知識がないときは、ここのつながりが必要なんだけど、ある程度のレベルまでいったら、こっちの英語のだけを使ってやることができるようになるから、まあ、最初のうちはやっぱりトランスレートしないといけないっていうのは、まあ、すごいわかるから、ここの トランスレートする、時期を乗り越えれば、もう完全に、アシュリーさんの場合は日本語か。日本語で考えられるようになるから、ここね、ちょっと踏ん張ってね、やれば完全に日本語を使えるんで。
That bell means we reached the end of today's episode. Thanks for joining us in another lazy conversation towards fluency. If you have any language-related questions and or just looking for general advice, send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com and we might respond in the next episode. Also, make sure to check out our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. We'd appreciate the support. This has been Joey.
Nayami.
Signing off. じゃあねー。
じゃあねー。